Welcome to Tipping Spears with Hannah Becker. Today's conversation promises to be an insightful one with a remarkable guest. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a regular listener, we're so glad you're here. Our goal is to bring you closer to the innovative leaders and thinkers shaping our future. And today we are thrilled to welcome Lieutenant Colonel Tom Schueman. Colonel Schueman graduated from Loyola University Chicago in 2008 and was commissioned through the Navy ROTC program. After the basic school and infantry officer course, he reported to 3D Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment at Camp Pendleton, where he served as a platoon commander with Company K, including a deployment to Sangin District, Helmand Province, Afghanistan, in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. Colonel Schueman's other operational assignments include advisor in JTAC, 1st Reconnaissance Battalion from 2011 to 13, including a deployment to Helmand Province, Afghanistan, in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, commanding officer at Lima Company, 3D Battalion, 4th Marines from 15 to 17, including a deployment in support of Marine Rotational Force Darwin, operations officer. 5th Marines from 2022 to 24, including the unit deployment program to Okinawa. His service outside the operating forces includes duty as the director, Combat Instructor School of Infantry West from 2013 to 15. From 18 to 21, he served as an English instructor at the United States Naval Academy. From 24 to 25, he served as the Future Operations Branch Head at Training Command and is currently the commanding officer of Advanced Infantry Training Battalion at Camp Lejeune. Colonel Schueman is a graduate of the Expeditionary Warfare School, Naval War College, Joint and Combined Warfighting School, and Georgetown University. He is a Stanford University Fellow and honorary graduate of the United States Naval Academy Class of 21. Welcome to Tipping Spears, Colonel Schueman.
Hey, Hannah, thanks for having me.
So to get us started this morning, can you tell us where your story begins?
The story begins, I think, with my mother. Is typically, I think, where most of us start, but we won't go all the way back to 1986. But I think hopefully my story is a story of service and my mom's willingness to serve and sacrifice for her children and her community. She's a Chicago police officer for over 25 years. And so I think this arc of service that has now been my adult life was certainly first informed through her example.
So what kind of got you interested in joining the Marine Corps?
Sure. A television was wheeled into my theology class on September 11th, 2001. And we started to watch videos of our nation under attack. This was at Marist High School on the south side of Chicago. And up until that point, I certainly had, I didn't have any interest in service. I did not have dreams of, my family doesn't have a military history. I didn't know really folks who had served. I wasn't like a big GI Joe kid. I was on the debate team, I was a pretty big nerd. And so I don't think certainly it was that day that was an inflection point, and I said, okay, I should do something about that. And that didn't necessarily mean that I was going to be a Marine. I think it meant that I was going to serve. At the time, again, I was going to a lot of kind of nerd camps or each summer to learn how to debate and learn constitutional law. And so I thought maybe my grandmother loved. I just watched a little bit of the episode with a colonel that you had, and he thought he had watched Top Gun, and so he was going to be right. So it's interesting how Tom Cruise has affected many of us, because I watched A Few Good Men, and I thought I was going to be a lawyer at the Navy JAG. So Tom Cruise he's actually a great military recruiter, and so that was my plan. I went to my little boot camp during ROTC. It's just a little week. They send you up to Great Lakes. And I had never seen a Marine, never knew anything about the Marines. Again, I thought I would be, you can't, well, not you can't handle the truth. That was Colonel Jessup. That would be a Marine, right? But I thought I'd be the cross-examining guy. And I noticed a difference pretty immediately of the seniors in my ROTC unit who were like the ones yelling at us, who were going to be Marines and who were going to go Navy. I saw the AMOI, the gunny, and I saw the Marine captain, and I saw some of the Navy personnel, and I said, yeah, I think I want to be like those ones, the Marines. And so that was my first step towards wanting to be a Marine. It just seemed like the standards were very high and the challenge was very great. And that is something that's always appealed to me.
That's such a great story. So was there a particular event or person that kind of served as a catalyst for your career?
Yeah, I think once I got to the basic school, I didn't know what I wanted to be in the Marine Corps. I still didn't know really anything about the Marine Corps, even though I was technically a second lieutenant. You can probably insert a lot of jokes around that, right? And so I still didn't know like what I wanted to do, who I wanted to be in the Marines. We did our first field exercise. It got down to 15 degrees. It was freezing. Uh, I'm from Chicago. I don't know how to like camp. So we're staying out in the woods and all my canteens were frozen. I didn't know how to heat up my MREs. They were just like solid frozen bricks. It was miserable. And we got back from that 2-day field evolution and everyone was like, we don't want to be a grunt. Like, we don't ever want to have to go camp out in the woods again. That was terrible. And I thought, if everybody else doesn't want the challenge, like that kind of makes me want the challenge. And so that was my first step towards wanting to be an infantry officer. And then, the people who influenced me most significantly early in my career, at least, was my first squad leader, Sergeant Trey Humphrey, my first platoon sergeant, now Sergeant Major Tim Henley, and Robert Kelly. He was a peer second lieutenant of mine. He was prior enlisted, and he just seemed to know always what the right thing to do was. And so those folks shaped how I thought about being a leader very early in my career. And then I went to the war and we had a very kinetic deployment there in a place called Sangin in Helmand Province. And right away, things were pretty violent. And what I witnessed these young men do on that deployment, run through minefields, charge machine guns, willingly give their life on the behalf of their brothers. Just the overall stakes and the consequences of the profession, and the incredible courage and heroism of our young men, that has singularly shaped how I've approached the rest of my career. Now coming on 18 years with a certain level of zeal that everything I do, while I still have U.S. Marines above my heart on my name tape, everything that I do while I wear this uniform has to be to set that young man up for that moment that we may ask him to do something very dangerous. And I owe it to that young Marine, but I also have, gotten to know the families very well. And I owe it to that mom, to that wife, to that child, that I know that at the end of the day that I have given everything that I can to make him or give him the best opportunity to be successful on the battlefield. And so I have certainly been very zealous in that pursuit, and I've spent most of my career in the infantry. And even when I was teaching poetry at the Naval Academy, I still somehow found ways to be a little bit probably over the top about this kind of topic, and what we need our young naval officers to do, and why they exist, and what our purpose is. And so I think probably that those people in that event really shaped the horizon and the arc of my career.
So I know, every journey has its hurdles. Can you tell us kind of what some of the obstacles were that you faced in your career, and how you overcame them?
Yeah, sometimes the obstacles come in the form of a human, right? Whether it's one of your subordinates, whether it's one of your senior enlisted, whether it's one of your peers, whether it's one of your bosses. I think this is not unique, right? We've all had a difficult person or a challenging person to work for, work with. They call it a leadership challenge, is sometimes how we define some of these Marines. Yeah, and then sometimes it's a mission or a circumstance that is a challenge, and so maybe you're part of a unit that you don't find super purposeful or meaningful or rewarding. I've been very, very blessed that I think maybe only one time I was in a unit that I thought sometimes I was wondering what are we actually doing here. So that's a challenge. Sometimes you're like have environmental effects as an infantryman that have been like pretty challenging, or injury setbacks, so I think I was having an existential crisis at one point about a leader that I was working for, and I went to one of my mentors, and I just thought, what the heck are we doing? Why am I even part of this circus? And and he said, well, what is it? Why are you here? And if you're going to stay, why would you stay? And it just took me just a second to kind of reflect. And I said, it's for the young Marine, it's for the Lance Corporal. And so how have I overcome those obstacles is that you through humility and recognizing it's not about you. It's not about you. And as soon as you take your ego or your pride and come back to the core and the very essence of what it means to be a servant leader, that it's not about you, a lot of that stuff then just starts to wash away. And you focus on that young man who deserves your very best. And then that's what you focus your energy on.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I think that's very applicable kind of in a variety of sectors and phases in the careers where people find themselves. So I know in addition to active duty, you founded a nonprofit, Patrol Base Abbate, a nonprofit dedicated to helping veterans and service members rest and refit inside friendly lines before redeploying into their communities with renewed purpose. Can you tell us a little bit about that nonprofit? What inspired you to start it?
Sure. That first deployment that I referenced, we had 25 killed in action. I had 19 casualties in my platoon. It was tough. It was also very rewarding in many ways. It was very purposeful in many ways, and as many casualties as we took, exponentially more did we inflict upon the enemy. We won that battle. At a point when I was teaching at the Naval Academy, so this is 2020, over a 30-day span, I had lost 3 Marines I had served with to suicide in a 30-day span. And at that point, I had lost more Marines on the home front than I'd lost on the battlefield. And I just had a moment of reflection, and I said, you did everything you could, and you've done everything that you can to keep your Marines alive on the battlefield. What are you doing to keep your Marines alive on the home front? Because it seems like this is a pretty deadly environment for them as well. And I felt like if you're a leader, you lead, you find a sandbag to fill. So I wanted to understand what are the risk factors around veteran suicide, and what are the protective factors, so that I can find an organization or an effort to support to help some prevention. And as I read through I just come from graduate school before I started teaching in literature, so I was used to reading like lots of academic literature. And so I went through all the academic literature, I went through all the VA suicide reports. And so what I found is year after year, what the reports would tell you is that the leading proximal cause and the leading risk factors around veteran suicides are feelings of disconnectedness, lack of purpose, lack of sense of belonging, isolation. The protective factors are then the inverse, right? High levels of community, high level of connectedness, high level of sense of belonging, high level of purpose. Those people are less inclined. And so I said, okay, that checks out. If you've read Sebastian Junger's book Tribe, or you've just been a human being, you know that being in relationships mean a lot. Having deep connections mean a lot. And so it's certainly not just a military person need. At our very core level as human beings, we have these needs. I would offer that the need for community, tribe, belonging, and purpose are intensified through service, because you're part of teams who everybody on the team would die for the person to your left and to your right. You have missions that feel very purposeful. And so I think those needs are basic human needs, but intensified through service. I think what I found initially interesting through my research is that the populations that are affected by suicide, and so non-combat veterans have a much higher suicide rate than combat veterans, and then the National Guard has the highest suicide rate amongst all veteran communities. And you might say, well, that seems surprising. It maybe on the surface it is, but then when you think about it, it's not, combat. The bonds that I forged there were a gift. The lessons that I learned in combat about life were a gift. I joined the Marine Corps to fight, and I got to do what I joined the Marine Corps to do. And I got to validate and affirm some things about myself as a young man that I think was ultimately a gift. And so in many ways, as horrible as combat is, it is also a very rich, meaningful experience. And so it's I don't think it's the combat that kills us. I think it's the bonds that we form when we're part of these tight-knit teams, and that is not only experienced in combat, and it's not only experienced in the infantry. I think if you're part of a motor T section, or a logistics section, or a communication section, or you're a maintainer on an aircraft, or you're down artillery, I think any of these communities find very deep meaning and purpose in what they're doing, and they form very strong bonds. And so that's why when you look at what the literature tells us in that lens, it's not actually that surprising that it's an all veteran issue, not just a combat veteran issue, not just a special forces issue. Okay, and so you have to think that probably only 1% of the veteran population falls into this special forces highly kinetic combat experience, right? So a very small portion, and year after year that portion of the veteran population decreases, since we haven't been at war in a while. And so then I said, okay, so what resources are available that support all veterans and get them connected in community? And as I surveyed this vast landscape of 45,000 veteran service organizations, what I discovered over and over again were a number of barriers and obstacles and boxes that you had to be able to check before you rated a given service. And I think many of these organizations have great missions that I think they're doing great work. I think you certainly want to start providing support and services to the people who have sacrificed the most. So that makes sense. But it really seemed like we kind of started and stopped there, and we forgot about the other 99% of the military population. And so while I had no initial ambition to found an organization, I wanted to find an organization. I could not find an organization that really aligned with what the data was very clear about, is that this is an all veteran problem. And so I founded Patrol Base Abbate as a non-clinical intervention that provides community connection and purpose around a common interest. We developed a program called the Return to Base program. And in the Return to Base program, we bring our veterans out to Montana for 5 days, 4 nights around a common interest. And so that common interest might be books, it might be music, it might be jujitsu, it might be weightlifting, it might be art. And so a lot of the organizations also are very narrowly focused. And we try to have this accessible and inclusive approach. And so I can't say, hey, I can't just have one interest out there, right? And say like, you must fit into this shoe, And so in this kind of spirit of inclusivity and accessibility, we said it's not going to be just what, I'm an infantry guy who likes to read books. If I were to found an organization for me, we would just walk through the books and read Walden and Hemingway, and that's like what we would do. But this has to be an organization for everybody. And so some people like fishing, and some people like art, and some people like lifting weights. And so we're going to build these programs around these common interests. The common interest is really just a hook to get people out, and then what the pillars of the program. It starts, each day starts with movement. So some type of mobility work in the morning, some type of light movement to kind of get people doing something physical again. There's acts of service associated with every return to base program. So you're going to get out, and we're going to get out into the local community there in Thompson Falls, Montana, and help out again, because when veterans are feeling when veterans are serving, they're feeling sacrificial, and they're feeling tying back into that purpose. And nature is a key aspect of our program. It's on a 60-acre ranch in the middle of a 250,000 acres of national forest land surround the base. So you are. I believe that there's something good for your soul when you're outside. And so we do, nature is a principle. Then really what the program is designed around, the key aspect of the program are our fireside chats. And that's when we kind of ask veterans to be vulnerable, to be honest. And I designed our program around a couple books by a guy named Dr. Jonathan Shea. He's kind of the preeminent scholar on moral injury and PTS. And he said that communal healing, even though he's a psychiatrist, he said that the best type of healing that he was ever able to make with his patients was through communal healing. He would get veterans in a circle around a table, and the trust and the empathy and the vulnerability with other veterans was more than he could ever achieve as a doctor and as someone who was not one of them. And he said, so often veterans just have a story, and they want to be heard, but they think that, I can't hear them, or unless you served, you couldn't relate. And so they heal themselves. And so we the fireside chats, we have some structure around those chats and some guided discussions, and really it's around the campfire that these veterans are building community and finding deep connection with one another. And we find that has been a life-saving, life-changing event for our veterans. And then but so that's an experiential, free of cost, by the way. We're going to fly you out to Missoula for free. We're going to pick you up. So no barriers, right? No rank, no ribbon, doesn't matter. If you raise your right hand, you're eligible. So every single person who served is eligible. And it's not going to be a lot of peacocking around the campfire of, oh, well, did you do this deployment? Oh, right. It's kind of a pretty safe place where it's just like, hey, we all served and we all like books. And that's why we're here, and so and we're very deliberate about fostering that kind of environment. But then you have to be able to sustain the impact, and we do that through local chapters around the country. And so every month you have a Patrol Base Abbate chapter meeting in your local community, both doing social events and service events. And that's how we can, one, reach you before you ever get out to Montana, and then we can keep you in the fold as you exit the base and head back to your community. And we're going to ask you to continue to serve and pay it forward, both in your family unit, in your community, and then stay connected there, right there in your hometown. And so kind of two aspects of our programming: the local chapters and the return to base program out in Montana.
Oh, that's fascinating. I love how y'all really, you took time and identified kind of the gaps. I feel like, or my family's experience, which is somewhat dated, given that it was in the peak of the war and it was over 10, 12 years ago. If there's any mental health challenge, the message is, just go to the VA. And the VA did not provide us any positive experience at all. And so many of the gaps that you outlined were things that we kind of identified just in our own experience with like post-war life. And I love how y'all are addressing that kind of in a non-clinical method. I think they're critical gaps, and they're gaps that good intentions aren't enough in terms of the clinical approach. There are these gaps that you're addressing, and you're equipping attendees with kind of the skills and then kind of the practice and the accountability to put it into place when they return home, which I think is just kind of another key area that the clinical approach, well, it's I mean, I believe it definitely has its role, doesn't necessarily put into place. So it's really encouraging to hear how that came about and kind of how y'all customize this programming to these areas that really were not being addressed, I think, in many of the mainstream kind of veteran suicide prevention programs.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know, suicide rates within the military community remain higher than that of the civilian population. And, you mentioned there, kind of some misunderstandings, like it affecting the broad military community, veteran community. Are there any other kind of misunderstandings about suicidal ideation or effective prevention among veterans that you've identified kind of in this experience?
Yeah, I first want to make it very clear that veterans are not damaged and broken or fragile, and that ultimately I think service makes you more resilient, and service equips you to be more successful as you transition and so I think some of the misperception is that you've largely only received this one narrative that service is detrimental to your mental health, to you and I have found that so many veterans are so successful after they transition largely because of what their services equip them to do. It's made them mentally tough. It's given them leadership skills. It's given them abilities to adapt. And so I think part of my work when I was leaving grad school was to elevate that narrative, because at the time, almost every report, every newspaper headline, every time you saw a veteran on a movie or a news story, it was how we are just this broken, damaged population, and really service is such a gift,
Mhm.
that makes us, that teaches us so many valuable lessons for life. And so I think that is this one perception that that I have found to be hollow and inaccurate. Uh, and I think veterans have perpetuated that to a degree ourselves. I think we have some culpability in that. And then obviously, the media or Hollywood has also kind of played on that. I'll stop on that front there before I go down too much of a rabbit hole. And then, yeah, I think um, when we think about different perceptions or efficacy around uh, mental health and suicide prevention, I think certainly there was a stigma around mental health when I first came in, and decades before. I think I think you'd be hard pressed to find a commander these days that would allow or tolerate a command climate that isn't accepting of uh, Marines receiving the support that they need, or soldiers or sailors. To me, it's like if a Marine breaks his arm and has to go to physical therapy after, and has to go to the doctor to
Yeah.
get it treated, and then has to go to physical therapy, it's like, well, of course, you
Yeah.
gotta, and so you gotta do that till you get better. And so I think for mental health, it's, you've got an invisible wound, you go to the doctor for it, you get it treated, you go to you come up with a therapy program. The issue that sometimes I think we gotta want to be cognizant of is like, it's not everything's a disorder. It's not
Mhm.
it's not, and not everything's a disability, and not everything needs to be permanent. Just like you can have an effective treatment plan to help you recover from your torn rotator cuff, that you might never be 100%, but you could be fully functional again, and you could be mostly healthy again. I think that we want to have an optimistic or a positive outlook on being able to go get treatment and get better, and we
Mhm.
want to get better. And if we're not getting better, maybe wonder, is do we have a good doctor who's
Mhm.
helping us get better? And and are there other aspects that are keeping us unwell?
Mhm.
Is it potentially our physical health is having a deleterious effect on our mental health? Is it our spiritual health? Is our soul? How is our soul? Is our soul sick, or is our soul healthy? Because if you have hope and a light and a strong belief in your soul, I think that helps you persevere and endure many other aspects of life. And so I think it's just it's a really holistic approach between a clinical pairing, a non-clinical
Mhm.
intervention like PBA, a spiritual aspect to all of this as spiritual beings, and physical health. I think it really is mental, moral, and physical, and it's total health, and you can't just do any one of these things in isolation.
Mhm. Mhm. So in 2022, you wrote a fascinating book called Always Faithful, a story of the war in Afghanistan, the fall of Kabul, and the unshakable bond between a Marine and an interpreter. Can you tell us a little bit about the book?
Sure. On that deployment that I have previously mentioned, I had an interpreter named Zach, Zanula Zaki, and he and I shared many hardships together. And our bond became that of, like you form with anybody when you're in those types of settings, it's really becomes a brotherhood. And Zach was there with me on some of my toughest days, and certainly helped keep me alive in several situations as well. Uh, the United States set up a program for our interpreters called the SIV program. which it made sense because it said if you are an interpreter with us, we'll offer you a path towards citizenship after, because we know that you will be persecuted for having served, and many people were assassinated and murdered who had support. And so, yeah, to increase the amount of volunteers and increase it, we developed this program. It seemed logical. Zach did his part. He served with for years, supporting the United States military with me for 7 months. And then when it came time to us to honor our part of that deal, we did not. And over a several year period, it became very obviously in vogue and timely around the Afghan withdrawal, where everybody was trying to help everybody. I had been working this. I'd already helped several of my interpreters because I went back as an advisor to the Afghan forces on a second deployment. I'd helped several of them with their packages. All of their packages were honored and approved as they should have been, and it was just Zach's package that we started to work in 2016 that wasn't making any progress. And now, as conditions deteriorated, I said, "How is it going to go for you if we can't get you out?" And he said, "I'll be killed." So yeah, it became my primary focus there. The summer of 2021, the spring, really it started in the spring of 2021. I was still teaching at the Naval Academy, and I started to ask for help. And there was no shortage of great Americans who were eager to help. Many people really, truly did their best on both sides of the political spectrum, the media, you name it, highest levels of government and the military. People were advocating and trying. This bureaucratic, insurmountable obstacle that was his special immigration visa just seemed that no matter who we had trying to help us, we could not overcome that hurdle. So yeah, I began to coordinate with a friend, some folks that I knew that were part of the evacuation. We got Zach to Kabul with his family. And yeah, it was like just running any other operation. It was planning, coordinating, lots of risk. It took some boldness, and ultimately, took some heroic and courageous actions from a friend of mine that I had gone to the basic school with, and he and his team rescued Zach on their third attempt to get out of to get onto LtCol. The first two attempts were very harrowing and dangerous, and so our story became a national headline, and it had a lot of attention at the time, and some different publishing companies and folks asked us to tell the story, or asked me to tell the story. I said, I'll tell the story if Zach, if it's equal parts me and Zach, because what the world probably doesn't need is one more field grade officer telling everybody about what the war was like. And so I thought that there's plenty of books out there that do that. And I thought, what would make this book interesting and also help Zach would be for him to co-author it. And if you want to know what Afghanistan's like, ask the guy who was born there and grew up there. And if you want to know what it was like during that horrible event around LtCol, I asked the guy who was there with his 6 children and his wife. He can probably tell you in a pretty compelling way what that was like. And so, yeah, the HarperCollins agreed to those terms, and we wrote the book, and really just trying to elevate Zach's story, because he's until recently still did not have a path towards citizenship. And to tell the stories of some of the heroes that I've got to serve with, starting with, of course, my mother, and then many of my Marines.
So I know, you were deeply involved in Afghanistan throughout your career, your service. What can you tell us kind of what was going through your mind, as events unfolded in Kabul with the withdrawal?
Yeah, it was a moral injury. I think, and so it was, I think, for many of us, a betrayal in the sense that uh, we were told we were winning. We were told that these were our partners. We were told that we were, the phrase was Shona by Shona, shoulder by shoulder,
Mhm.
right? That we would be there with them. Um, and I've been indoctrinated my whole career about accountability,
Mhm.
uh, accepting accountability, uh, also being accountable for my people and my equipment.
Mhm.
And so many of these things that were so inculcated in me throughout my military career seemed to have been violated. And so, yeah, I think of all the injuries you sustain, I think moral injuries are often the most difficult to recover from, um, because they're a soul wound, because they shake the very foundation of your core beliefs. Um, they're a betrayal, and so I think that's what many veterans were probably experiencing around the withdrawal, and the very beginning of the warrior archetype. The very first story we see is, Homer tells us in the Iliad, King Agamemnon is taking Achilles' Medal of Honor, right? Achilles has been awarded something for his valor, and his leadership says, basically it's the first issue of Stolen Valor too, and he says, I'm going to take your Medal of Honor. And his response to that is a moral injury. And so, yeah, I mean, 3,000 years later, it's still a thing that we face from time to time in our profession.
So, kind of as we wrap up this morning, can you tell us do you have any parting thoughts or final words of advice that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think, I have a unique perspective in that, I am around my battalion trains the squad leaders and the platoon sergeants of the Marine Corps. I just finished an operational tour just a couple of years ago where we deployed all over the Pacific, and there I got to teach young midshipmen at the Naval Academy. I think what I would leave everybody with is that there's so much to be encouraged by, because the men and women that are still in this uniform, they're the greatest assets. They're the treasure of this country. Uh, just last night I sat in one of a period of instruction that my instructors were giving, and these young 18, 19-year-old Marines, and their eagerness to learn the knowledge, um, and they are prepared to do violent things if tasked, and they will do those things, and they stand ready, if our nation asks them, and they will perform valiantly. And just like the Marine Corps, I think, maybe this November 10th, this, like the Marine Corps has for 250 years. I think our Marines and our folks in uniform today, are as ready as ever, as committed as ever, and so it's just so humbling to be able to serve them, and to fight alongside them. And we should take great courage around, who still raises their right hand to serve something bigger than themselves. It's just this special, remarkable thing that I've been able to be a witness and experience. And so that's what I would offer.
Well, thank you so much for, sharing your insights, your experiences today. I know your contributions to our nation continue to impact so many, and I appreciate you taking time to chat with me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Hannah. I appreciate it.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tipping Spears. We hope this conversation has sparked new ideas and challenged the way you think about the future. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and we'll catch you next time with another exciting guest.